Let me say yeah. Let me say yeah.
We are back for the Stanley Cup Finals here in our home city, Edmonton. The Oilers versus the Florida Panthers. Yeah, back up here in the cheap seats. As always, I have my co-host with me, Jimmy Ward. Jimmy, how are you tonight?
I'm doing quite well. How are you? We got a very special guest today who is on the program and donating his wonderful time to us. So we're much appreciated of that. He is the co-host of the Liberty Brew podcast, along with Locked On Flames, and also occasionally with Locked On Oilers podcast. We have Nick Zararis on. Nick, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, gentlemen. It's the best time of year. We got elite hockey. Every night there's hockey on.
Yes, it's been a little bit of a wait between the conference finals and Stanley Cup finals, and I think everyone's getting antsy and ready to go. I think we've seen every single stat, microstat, analytics, trying to figure out who's going to win this thing, but we're gonna do our best to give our opinion, and I think it's going to be absolutely wonderful. So, Phil, what do you got for us?
Yeah, so Nick is lives in New York, so a little bit of a time difference. So again, we appreciate his time, and also like Jimmy mentioned, he is a co-host of a New York Rangers podcast called
Liberty
what was it
Blue.
called? Liberty Blue, right? Sorry. So why don't you just take us through what went wrong with the New York Rangers in the conference finals this year, in
Do you want
your
the long
opinion?
answer? Do you want the long answer or you want the short answer?
Well, we've got about an hour with you, so as long as you keep it under an hour, I guess.
All right, so the short answer is Florida Stars are better. You know, there there's no knock on being the second best at something if you lose to a better team. There's no shame in that. You did all you could. Barkov, Bob. It's a really good 1 through 5. The Rangers group, Panarin, Trocheck, Kreider, Zibanejad, Lafreniere. It's good. I don't know if you're taking any of those guys, but I don't know if I would do that for sure. And when the Stars play each other head to head, the Panther Stars won those minutes. And the minutes that the Rangers depth guys were out there, they didn't get killed, but they weren't contributing anything offensively. The goal differential for the series was 4, two of those being empty net goals. So if you want to keep it to just the parameters when the games are competitive, goal differential of 2. The Rangers win 2 games in overtime. Those are their only 2 wins in the series. On the margins, you would say it was close. To only lose a series by 2 goals, not empty net situations, you're pretty close. And I think that's the short-sighted view. I think the fact that the Rangers had a very similar conference final experience 2 years ago against Tampa Bay, very similar roster construction, Tampa Bay and Florida, really good high-end players, goaltender capable of playing at an elite level, one really good defenseman, and then some quality supporting defensemen. And the Rangers guys weren't good enough in 2022. They weren't good enough this time around. I think the Rangers have tapped out their groups. They've gotten the most they can from the group of guys they have, and they got a lot of questions to ask about what direction they want to go in. They have the opportunity to kind of tweak some of their roster, some guys restricted free agents, unrestricted free agents. But the short answer is Florida Stars are better. The longer answer is that the Rangers are not set up for where hockey is going. Their defensemen are a little bit on the slow side. Their defensemen are not great puck movers. And that's ultimately what was their undoing against Florida. Florida forechecks extremely aggressively. They're really physical, and they're content to cycle you 35, 45, a minute seconds to a minute and a half. They don't even want a scoring chance. They just want to make you play defense and tire you out. And then they get the plays where they're jamming the pucks at the net front and they take advantage of the Rangers defense being slow, catching guys out of position. And really, it was death by a thousand cuts. The scores were really close. But once game five started unfolding the way it did, where the Rangers scored, they get out to the lead. Florida scores first, Rangers score shorthanded to make it 1-1. Then Florida scores again. I didn't really feel like the Rangers were going to be able to put two past Bob that night. And that was kind of the case here. You go look at the series, you're not going to win a series you only score 12 goals in. You're just not. They don't score enough, and it's because they play too much defense. They're good, but the bar this time of year is great. You look at the recent Stanley Cup winners, the Rangers are close, but they don't have talent the way Vegas does, Colorado did, Tampa Bay did, maybe the Blues, maybe Washington, not Pittsburgh, not the Blackhawks, not the Kings. The Rangers are a really good team. They haven't risen to the level of greatness really maybe ever in my life, frankly. They've made one cup final in that time, and God bless Lundqvist for getting it to 5 games, but they have a really good team, and to win the Stanley Cup, you got to be great.
Jimmy, what are your thoughts? Oh, we might have lost Jimmy there.
I think he's frozen, yeah.
Well, I guess just you and me, Nick. So,
No worries.
um, yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and uh, I always tell Jimmy, and we've said it on this podcast before, how it just didn't seem too long ago when the New York Rangers management was coming out with a letter to their fans saying that they're going into a full rebuild, and that rebuild did not take very long. And uh, I know Jimmy always says you gotta, look at a guy like Shesterkin, right? When you get an elite goalie that kind of falls on into your lap on your team, it can really turn a team around really fast.
Yeah, absolutely. You add that, you think about, I think the problem is a lot of people look at the letter as like hard, fast, and true. And yes, they did do that. They traded not Zibanejad, excuse me, Zuccarello, McDonough, Rick Nash, Kevin Hayes, JT Miller. They traded the core of the last team. They got some assets back. But after a year and a half of being bad, they also gave Neil Pionk a first round pick to the Jets for Trouba. They signed Adam Fox. They gave Panarin the most any unrestricted free agent has ever gotten on the open market. And they very quickly said, we're going to do both. We're going to try and be competitive and rebuild at the same time. And that's how you got David Quinn just wasting the first year of Lafreniere's development and not giving Kakko enough ice time. Gerard Gallant took that message to heart and said, okay, we're trying to win right now. Okay, I can do that. And did not give those guys enough time. I think the Rangers have been fortunate that Shesterkin is as good as he is, and that some of the guys who have come here have chosen to be here. Fox being one of the 5 best defensemen in the world, they got lucky he wanted to be here. If he's not here, this is a very different team. If Panarin takes the more money from whether it be the Islanders, or I forget who the other team was that was in the mix for him, but if he takes more money from the Islanders, I don't think the Rangers are getting as much credit for their rebuild as going as well as it has. Because frankly, their main contributors aren't rebuilding pieces. Zibanejad and Kreider were here already. Panarin is an unrestricted free agent. Trocheck, an unrestricted free agent. Trouba, a trade acquisition. Adam Fox, a trade acquisition. Their draft guys, Schneider, Miller, Lafreniere, Kakko, Hedel. None of those guys, Lafreniere this year I'll give credit for, but none of those guys have made huge impacts. Schneider's fine. I don't see the first pair defensemen, second pair defensemen. A lot of people seem to. They're fine. They still don't have any home runs here. Lafreniere still hasn't hit 70 points in a season. He might finally get that next year if he gets some power play time, but I think the Rangers, I don't want to say they kneecapped themselves, but they tried to get good too fast, and it may have ultimately limited how good they could ultimately be.
Yeah, and I always use the comparison of like I think it was the 2015 Flames where Johnny Gaudreau came on the scene and they were trying to rebuild, and then they had that line with like Hoodler and Gaudreau and Furland, and they were good and they made the playoffs, and it almost like sets you back, right?
Yeah, because the comparison I've used in the past is like a sugar rush. You have that piece of candy, you get that buzz for a good 5 minutes, and then afterwards you feel terrible. You get a stomach
Yeah.
ache, you get a headache. That's kind of what the Rangers got. because they got damn close. They got really close twice. There's no chance they would have beaten Colorado in 2022. I can confidently say, even if they beat Tampa Bay, they're not beating that Colorado team. I think they could have beat Edmonton if they got there this year. I do. I think the Rangers are uniquely situated. The style they play, I think, would have given Edmonton a little bit of a harder time because it's very similar to what Edmonton likes to do. Shesterkin versus Skinner, you like that matchup, and the Edmonton depth isn't great, but now you're sitting here and right now, the early consensus from the people who cover the team is that the Rangers aren't going to change a whole lot, that they're going to give Lindgren an extension, that Trouba's going to get the benefit of the doubt for playing hurt in the playoffs. Zibanejad has a no move. They're going to run it back with more or less the same group. They're going to change the Gustafsson spot. Maybe that'll be Zach Jones. Maybe it'll be someone outside the organization. Maybe Hedel moves to wing and you got to look for a third center. Maybe Brennan Othmann gets to start the season on the main roster, but I don't think you can sell to me or the informed fan that we're going to run back the same group that just lost to Florida in 6 games and really say we think we can win the Stanley Cup without meaningful change. You've had 2 examples of this now where they've played a better team in the conference final and they've entirely run out of gas by game 6.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, Jimmy, we lost you there for a minute, but I wanted to hand it over to you.
Yeah, Nick pretty much nailed it on the head. As I'm sitting there listening, I'm just nodding my head, yes, yes, and yes. Yeah, depending what I read, I've seen conflicting things where Drury had talked about mulling over possibly doing a bit of a facelift, but I've also heard that he may also, same thing, run it back. The issue that I have with the Rangers as well, everything that Nick says is true, is in order to get the most out of the players that are staying, there's going to need to be subtraction. Then you're going to have to figure out, you're going to have to reshuffle players in the proper spots, and then you're going to have to add. Will the Rangers do that? Probably not. So in my opinion, of the 8 defensemen that were available in the playoffs, I would only bring 4 back. And those 4 would be Jones, Schneider, Miller, Fox.
Yep.
The rest 100%. I would find a way to move the rest, depending on what that is. I would trade Barclay Goodrow based on the fact that his value will never be as high as it is now. And hopefully everyone ignores a 40% shooting percentage when you're doing it. But there are GMs like Rob Blake, Brad Treliving that love those kind of guys, and I'm sure you can do something about that, hopefully. I would move Kreider away from Mika, preferably third line left winger between Hedel and, depending if you don't want to trade Kako, I don't want to give him away. If he's part of a bigger deal to acquire a top end right winger, then I do it. Otherwise, I'm comfortable with him being a good defensive third line who can possibly someday provide some offense. So that would leave, I would move Laff back to left wing. I'd put him with Mika and that right wing spot that's open. And then I would have Panarin with Trocheck and anyone, because anyone, say what you want about Panarin, but anyone that plays with Panarin ultimately gets better. Trocheck, Strome, anyone they inserted on that right wing for the longest time. And then you go down to your 4th line. I'm looking at probably VC can play left or right, I believe.
Yeah.
And then insert 4th line center through free agency. I go Will Cooley on the left side. And depending if he works hard, improves his skating, improves his puck protection, maybe Matt Rempe is 13th forward. Or Enstrom. Maybe I lean towards Enstrom. And then I probably pair Miller Fox. Then I go Jones on the 3rd left. I get a free agent signing on the right side, and then I try and get a good middle pair with Schneider on that second pairing.
That's a good diagnosis. It's very similar. I've read a few people who've had similar outlines, similar ideas. I struggle to believe they're going to move on from Trouba, which is the issue. I think they've invested way too much in him as a person as opposed to a hockey player. And that's not a knock on who he is as a person. He's a fundamentally good person. And I think in another situation, he could be a lot more effective if he played less minutes, he had less responsibility. But he's the weakest link, and he gets paid the second most of any defenseman on your team. You can't have
And that's
that.
the problem. That's the problem. Like, it's the $8 million. And you root for him. I do, because you want the Rangers to be good.
Exactly.
But he's not. He's just. I don't know. It feels like he just doesn't make the proper reads. He loses his man. I don't know how many times, and I mean he's big, I, and he hits, but I mean he doesn't provide that of an $8 million defenseman. And I think Drury. I don't know how I feel about Chris Drury.
I'm very
Um,
lukewarm. He's
he
fine. I don't think he's bad. I don't think he's good. I think he's fine.
I think I do. I think he's fine, but he terrifies me at times. Like I'm afraid he's going to do something like trade Pavel Buchnevich for nothing, and then take the money you would have paid for him and give it to Nemeth, Goodrow.
Reeves.
Oh my gosh, I'm just like okay, but I feel like he also I feel like he corrects. Like if he makes a mistake, I find he doesn't repeat it. So I think that I look at Drury as a player, how he came up at all sort of levels. Like he didn't just get handed, like he came through the organization. He seems like an intelligent person. He was an intelligent hockey player. And so I like to think that he's probably at least methodically thinking about things. Um, but we'll see. We'll either be really surprised or we're going to be going, oh, here we go again. Right.
Pretty
So,
much.
yeah, that's just kind of what I have sort of gathered from observing over the past couple of years.
It's interesting because, like you mentioned, the first offseason's an atrocity. That first offseason when he got the job is GM malfeasance of the highest order, getting rid of a useful first line player that's you still haven't replaced 3 years later for spare parts,
Mm-hmm.
trying to force guys onto the team because you feel that they need to play a certain way, as opposed to addressing the fundamental issue. I agree with you. The Rangers do need to get more physical. They do need to get tougher. But it's important that your best players play that way. It's one thing to add Ryan Reeves as a 12th forward, Sammy Blais as a 10th forward. If Zibanejad and Kreider aren't about it, they're not about it. Putting Ryan Reeves in the lineup once every week or so is not going to make Zibanejad and Kreider play more physically. It's not going to make them cycle the puck, dump and chase. Until the Rangers address their root issue, which is that their star players are not good enough and they don't play playoff style hockey, they're not going to find success. You know, I hate to bring the Leafs as the comparison, but the Leafs have been getting made fun of for 7 years now for running back the same group over and over again. The Rangers aren't at that point. They've won some playoff series in there and they have goaltending and they have a little bit better depth. But
And they compete.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the thing. The Rangers are a little bit more competitive, but if you don't win the cup at the end of the day, it's great. I mean, it's going to suck going to the Garden next year and seeing 2023, 2024 regular season champions as a banner up there, but that's all you get for this. It was a good season, but ultimately, and I said this the other day to somebody, it's great that was the best season in the history of Rangers, regular season in the history of Rangers hockey. Doesn't say a lot about the organization that that was the best regular season in 98 years of playing professional hockey, that your season ends in 6 games to a Florida team you could have beat if you had improved your roster just a little bit. You know, the deadline left something to be desired. I thought I understood what they were trying to do with Roslovic, and Wenberg was fine. I have no problem. If they could keep Wenberg for cheap, I wouldn't have an issue with that. But this was the team to load up on. I think part of the reason I'm so worried is I think part of me thinks Drury's in self-preservation mode more so than anything. I think that's why he didn't trade Perot for Gensel. I think he realizes a year or two from now, this roster is probably not going to be that good. 2 years from now, Panarin's an unrestricted free agent. Kreider's an unrestricted free agent. Zibanejad will be 33 or 34. Trocheck will be 34. You're telling me a team with Zibanejad and Trocheck at 34, Lafreniere, Brennan Othman, Gabe Perreault. You're telling me that's the core of a team that's going to win the Stanley Cup? Like, I just don't see that vision. So I struggle to see what the long-term planning is here and why they opted to not be aggressive at the deadline.
I I didn't want them to be aggressive at the deadline too much.
Okay.
Um,
Elaborate, please.
the reason being is because where we were at the start of the year with limited cap space and the spots that we needed to fill, and then obviously we brought in a new coaching staff, which was also needed. Wasn't my I had about a list of 6 guys I wanted. Lavi was probably 5th on that list.
About the same for me.
That's a whole
Yeah.
different topic. I thought he did a good job this year.
Unquestioned.
I mean, with what Drury gave him to start the year with Nick Bonino and Tyler Pitlick and
Blake Wheeler.
yeah. And so I thought he played guys in the best possible positions, but again, where they're situated is not ideal in my opinion. We don't have a lot of draft capital, and I didn't think anybody that was available was going to win us the Stanley Cup. I just didn't. I didn't think
Buchnevich might have. If he gave St. Louis a first and something for Buchnevich, I think
it was. I think the asking price wasn't that astronomical. I think it was 2 firsts.
I would have done.
I would have paid it. I also would have done that, but he's about the only one I would have brought in. Gensel, I wouldn't have traded Perreault. You're essentially trading a younger Jake Gensel, and I think that's the ceiling for Perreault. He's Jake Gensel.
I'm not a prospects guy, so I have to take what I know about these guys from what I've read from what other people have written. The problem with waiting for Perreault is that he's probably not going to be an impactful NHL player for at least 2 more seasons. And that's 2 seasons from now when your core is going to be a lot older and the core of your team is going to be Lafreniere, Keandre Miller. Shesterkin will be, I think, 30, 31 by then. Mm-hmm. And I think as soon as Shesterkin starts to regress, this core is terrible. I think as soon as Shesterkin starts to regress, the team, the floor falls out from under them.
It's definitely a really weird timeline for where we're at. Like when we went into the season, what was it? The year after 22, I was, and we had coming into this season, we had no cap space, and I was very big on like we should just take a step back for a couple years, and let Heedle I was against the Trocheck signing.
Me too.
Not because I love Vincent Trocheck, but again, I was like, why not? Like, let's let Heedle be the 2C. We'll go get a 3rd-line center.
Yeah, no, I wanted Dylan Strome for that spot instead of Trocheck because he would have been about $2 million cheaper, and he wouldn't have signed for as long. That was my only qualm with the contract they gave Trocheck is he's going to be 37 when that thing expires. He's not playing the 37. We can just be honest and say that.
Well, and we'll hope the cap is $110 million and won't be so bad.
Hey, the Rangers keep making conference finals and making the TV ratings spike. Maybe it will be $110 million.
We'll need it. Or we'll need a luxury tax when we can spend all the money. That worked out great too.
Yeah.
Were you a fan? Like I went through some dark times. The Lindros, Bure.
I was aware of what was going on, but I didn't particularly understand what was going on. Like I remember Bure and Lindros being on the Rangers, Halik. I remember the pre-Yager Rangers, but the first I watched was 05-06.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 92 was the 3rd grade for me. That was the Ranger fan inception. And from then I followed religiously. But yeah, those were some bad. I look back at those and I look back at what I'm seeing now, and I'm okay. Like when we lost to Florida, I said, I'm okay. We lost to a better team and was able to just kind of let it go in peace. 22 was hard because we were up 2-0.
Yeah.
And 4 straight. And I just hate losing to the Devils, period. So
last year's team didn't deserve to beat the Devils. They were soft. They didn't put the work in. They dicked around all regular season, and they didn't put in the effort to be a good team.
I didn't want Kane on one hip. I would have took Kane this year. This year's Kane, if we had this year's Kane in the spot last year, I think it would have been a different outcome.
I don't think he solves their fundamental issue. It's been the same issue for 3 years now. The defense isn't good enough. They play way too much defense. But
the bigger crater was at right wing at the time. We had no right wingers. None. I mean,
I don't disagree.
They would have been the 2 best right wingers available for absolutely no cost. It didn't cost us anything.
Yeah.
Outside of mid-round picks.
Yeah.
And prospects that would never play.
Yeah.
So I was okay with that.
Yeah. They're in a very weird spot now. As soon as we're done recording, I'm going to go finish editing my 9,000 word, the season is over, what to do now column. But the main takeaway is there's no easy solution. You had mentioned it. If you're going to improve the team, you probably got to rip something off. You probably got to take someone good out of the group. And without the willingness to do that, you're not going to change that much. And
I agree with you. If he just, you mentioned it on your podcast, if it's something like we had Victor Arvidsson or some random.
Tavo Teravainen, like none of these
Yeah,
guys are.
no, we'll
That's
just
not.
in.
That's just another guy. That's fine. Like
Yeah.
those are good hockey players. Like
Mhm.
I don't want any either of them. Marcia is good, but he's too old, and he's not going to be worth the 7 or 8 year deal you give him to. Look, if they want to get nuts and they want to try and like make $11 million in cap space and give Stamkos 4 by 11, I don't think it would work, but at least it would be creative. There are options. I just don't know
Mhm.
how willing they are to be creative. You mentioned it. They can absolutely get a taker for Gaudreau. They absolutely can get a taker for Trouba. Do they
Mhm.
have the willingness to do that? Do they have like the political conviction, the will to trade away a captain and an alternate captain? I don't know. I do not know if they have the willingness to do that, but you can make $11 million like that. If you really
Mhm.
wanted it to improve the team, all you got to do is trade
100%.
those guys. And you can
100%.
you can replace one of those guys internally. You can replace Gaudreau with Brett Berard, who's going to come up next year and it will make an impact. He will play next year. I think there's
Mhm.
no problem with that. Replacing Trouba and Lindgren, I don't think you're going to do both. I think you could turn Lindgren into another defenseman, or you could turn him into a middle six forward, and then you promote Jones to take the Lindgren spot. You're still going to need one more lefty, but you're going to have chances to improve the roster. You got to have the will to do it, though.
Maybe Brett Pesci, lefty, left
I
side.
don't I don't mind Pesci. I think Pesci's really
Mhm.
good. I think if Pesci had stayed healthy, I think he would have had an outside chance of being on the Olympic team next year. I think he's really one of the six best American defensemen in the league. I don't think they're
Mhm.
going to pay for D. I don't. I think if they're going to spend money on something, it's going to be on a forward because I don't think they realize the defense is a problem. I think they think they're just not getting the bounces. I think they think that Trouba is unlucky as opposed to a poor defenseman. Same thing with Lindgren.
They're going to use the injuries as an excuse.
Yep, 100%. I think the
Mhm.
way the way they wrapped up the season, the way the availabilities went, the fact that Trouba's on the hockey Netflix show, the fact he's in the AstraZeneca commercial, the fact he always does the sit down feature with ESPN, the Rangers are invested in Jacob Trouba, the brand. I don't think they're going to trade him or buy him out, which if they can't find a taker, you can make $4 million out of thin air instead of that's a roster play. $4 million, you can sign a solid middle six forward or a third
Mhm.
pair defenseman for 4 million. Like I know a
Yep.
lot of people are very sour on Gustafson right now because his series wasn't good against Florida. If they could get Gustafson for $1.5 million, you do that every single time and you figure it out later. He's a solid NHL defenseman. The problem was they asked him to play defense for him and Trouba because Trouba isn't playing defense.
Yeah. I don't think he fits on the team just for that simple reason is I don't think there's a partner for him.
I think him and Fox had good run. Him and Fox worked together okay. I would like to see Miller and Fox at some point. I would like to see
Mhm.
Jones and Fox at some point. I think a key for the Rangers going forward is what can we do to get more out of the guys here? How can we get Keandre Miller to be consistently our second or third best defenseman on the team? How can we get Zibanejad to shoot the puck more? How can we get him and Kreider in the offensive zone more? How can we get Kako to take the puck to the net? We got to find solutions to these in-house problems because they're not getting rid of any of the guys I just mentioned. They're not going to get rid of Fox, Zibanejad, K. Andre, Schneider, whatever. You got to improve who's here. And these guys are developed. You're not going to change what Mika Zibanejad wants to do. He's 32 years old. He is who he is as a hockey player. And the only way you're going to change him is by changing who he plays with.
Yeah. You'll have to do it by subtracting the ones I mentioned
For
and then
sure.
reshuffling where they go. That's the only hope. And then you can plug in the proper players, assuming they know which players are going to target and are they available. So,
That's the thing.
yeah.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
They've really kind of
Phil,
hit, they've
Phil,
hit
you
a,
listening?
Well, let's
sorry.
yeah, no, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. This is kind of how I wanted this one to go. You guys both Rangers guys.
I
Really
love
good
it.
perspectives and but I'm going to ask Nick this question. We'll put the Rangers to bed now and why don't you let all of our Oiler fans that listen to our podcast, there's quite a few of them. What can they expect from that team that took out your beloved Rangers, the Florida Panthers?
I think the Oilers' main problem with their team, and the Oilers are better than the Rangers. It's the same problem the Rangers have. They don't clear the puck particularly well. They love to rim it around the boards. They love the alley-oop to get it out of the zone to pressure. Uh, Nurse, CC, Kulak, those guys are beatable. Those guys are exploitable. Broberg's a good puck mover, but he's on the smaller side. He's gonna get a lick, you know. Florida's big, they're fast, they really cycle the puck aggressively, and they are going to make your life miserable because they're going to turn every game into a rock fight, and they are going to dare the referees to call a penalty on everything. That's the thing that stuck out to me the most about Florida was Florida commits legal interference pretty much every shift where guys just stop skating in front of someone who's behind them and make the person go around them. They clutch, they grab, they turn. And the referees are not going to start a parade to the penalty box because they don't want to decide the game. They want to let them play, and that inherently favors Florida against a team like Edmonton. Now, Edmonton special teams have been the best of any team in the playoffs. They've killed off 46 of 49, 45 of 48 penalties. And these playoffs, it's one of those two numbers, I forget. And their power play is still over 30%, even though they didn't have a lot of chances against Dallas and they had gone cold there for a little while. Edmonton is going to have a really good shot at this. Florida's good, but Edmonton's trump card is their star players are better. McDavid is the only person in these playoffs I would say I would take before I would take Barkov right now of any forward in these playoffs. He's been tremendous, and frankly, he wasn't even that good in the Vancouver series, and they're still here. Draisaitl is maybe the best playoff performer of this generation of players. He's consistently dominant when he's out there, and the emergence of Evan Bouchard, that's the reason the Oilers are here. You go back and look through recent Oilers history, we're talking about Darnell Nurse, Duncan Keith, Tyson Barrie. Okay, hockey players. None of those is a 1D on a cup team. Bouchard can be the 1D on a cup team, and it's kind of given them the ability to play at this higher level. When they play McDavid with Bouchard, they score something like 70% of the goals when those two are on the ice together. They are as dominant as can be. The key for the Oilers in this series will be real simple, surviving the minutes McDavid and Bouchard aren't on the ice together.
Jimmy?
Go. What question you want from the Panthers' perspective, Oilers' perspective?
Well, yeah, like what do you have anything on the Stanley Cup Finals coming up here?
Yeah, Nick, hammered that home beautifully, but if I could, I'll try and add to that if I can. I'm having a difficult time deciding who I think is going to win this series based on the fact that there's so many ripples to this series, and there's a lot of if you make an argument for one thing, it seems to be a ton of overlap on a lot of things. The Florida Panthers, for one, sort of criticized because their offense isn't as good as the Oilers, but on the other hand, they faced better goaltending. A lot of people talk about Stuart Skinner's goaltending. It hasn't been very good, but the other teams have happened to be worse. Now, is that a case of Edmonton's elite finishing, that they're able to just finish more? I don't know. The Oilers like to generate a lot of offense off the rush and slot shot, right? Similar to what the Rangers had done. They're not a big cycle team, although they started to get better in the Dallas series, holding pucks down low. So they'll need to continue to do that. I think the problem, and anytime you've seen the Oilers struggle, is they struggle against teams that pressure hard up ice. And Florida does it consistently and incredibly well, and they don't stop. You look at the series in which they went 7, it was Vancouver. Vancouver could have won that series had Pettersson played to his ability, had they not lost Demko. And to be honest, Florida's wingers are exceptionally better than Vancouver. So I see Florida as a combination of the strengths of the teams they've played. So Nick is absolutely right. Can the bottom 3 Oiler defense absorb hits and also make plays in order to get zone exits so that the Oilers can get through the neutral zone with speed? Because you're not going to stop McDavid. You're not really going to stop Draisaitl. Florida will have to do it as a unit of 5, and their best shot is to make it very, very difficult for the Oilers to leave the zone. If the Oilers leave the zone with any kind of speed, that's where they generate a lot of offense. If I look at the series as a whole, I think, Nick's thinks that officiating may go to the side of Florida. I'm not sure what they're going to do. It could be a case where if Florida's up 2-1 or up 2-0, and Knoblauch decides to make a comment in the presser about, like he did in Dallas, about the standard, that could shift things. Can the Oilers penalty kill be 100% again? Because it's going to need to be at the 93% rate that they're going in order to, like, if their special teams are going to be successful, their power plays running at 37. If it can stay at 30, I think they got a chance. They do have the best defenseman in the playoffs left with Evan Bouchard, but after that Bouchard Ekholm pair, I'd say it goes Florida's 1, 2, 3 before I even hit the next pair of the Oilers. It really is for the Oilers. It's going to come down to special teams. They're going to have to win special teams by a significant margin, and McDavid's going to have to be nuclear in this
Pretty
series.
much. You nailed it. I think McDavid, I think the stars are the key here for Edmonton. They've been the key the entire way. They have the first four guys in points for the entire playoffs are all Oilers. I think the one real question you have is, can you keep riding these guys this much? The miles are going to start to add up. Them and Florida have a comparable workload. Edmonton's only played one more game than them, but the miles start to add up. Those minutes start to creep up. I don't know if you can afford to play your fourth line 6 minutes the entire game. I don't know if that's feasible this time of year. Are you going to ask McDavid to play 26 minutes a night for 7 games after the playoff run they've already been on? Is Bouchard going to tick up closer to 30? The miles will start to accumulate, and that benefits Florida because Florida rolls their lines pretty evenly, rolls their pairs pretty evenly, and Florida's style is meant to wear you down. We just watched the Rangers die death by 1,000 cuts of, we're going to dump the puck in, turn your back to the defense, try and get it up ice. Oh, failed exit, regroup, failed exit, regroup. We still have the puck. We're cycling. That starts to accumulate over the course of a series. The hits add up, Evan Rodriguez, Kachuk, Bennett. They got some nasty dudes on that Florida team who are going to make it uncomfortable for the Oilers. So I really do agree that it'll come down to special teams. And then Skinner, he's been abominable in these playoffs and he's been lights out. He was great in 5 and 6 in games 5 and 6 against Dallas. He also had like a .730 save percentage in a game against the Canucks. You don't know what you're going to get, and he really benefits from playing with a lead. When Edmonton plays with a lead, he's a very different goaltender from when they're playing from behind or when it's a tie game. He starts to get antsy, he gets a little skittish, loses his positioning, and that's where Edmonton's gotten into trouble, is when they ask Skinner to do a little bit too much, they can't make it happen.
Yeah, if you look at the analytics, when the Oilers are trailing versus having a lead, when they are trailing, they are on another planet. They are exceptional. I think their Corsi 4 is like in the 70s when they're trailing, because they get that level of desperation and all of a sudden they ramp it up. I feel like when they have a lead, it's almost like they go into safe mode, or I don't know what it is, but it was such a stark contrast when I was going through some of those numbers. The funny thing is, a lot of me points to Florida, but the way the Dallas series had me being like, man, is Edmonton just going to do this? Are they, is like, you know what I mean? Like, it's crazy to me to think that Dallas won 2 games despite not scoring a power play goal. And in one of the games, they only allowed 10 shots with Jake Ottinger net. So I'm like, I don't know if that's being talked about enough, and I don't want to, like, I took the Stars last series for obvious reasons, and I got a lot of hate for that. And then the narrative's like, well, Dallas was deep and Dallas was this and that, and we beat them, so Florida will be the same. So I want to ask you a question. How is Florida going to be different? I mean, outside of maybe 66% on the kill, but a lot of that is not necessarily the kill alignment. It's more Jake Ottinger can't stop a shot on the power play. How is Florida different from Dallas in terms of depth? Because we mentioned those things about Dallas. So in your opinion, how is that different?
Florida's high-end guys are better. I love Rope Hintz. He's one of my favorite players in the entire league. Barkov's a lot better than him. That's not a knock on Hintz. Barkov's one of the 5, 10 best players in the entire world. Jason Robertson, 40 goal guy. Reinhardt had 57. You go down the list, you could Pavelski kind of faded as that series went along. You'd probably take Sam Bennett over him at this point. Tyler Seguin or Kachuk, Verhage or Jamie Benn, you start going down the list, and Dallas is good. Don't get me wrong. I picked Dallas to win the Stanley Cup coming into the playoffs. I thought they were the deepest team, and they had the best goalie of the quality teams. Edmonton Stars just said no. It's that straightforward. McDavid and Draisaitl, Bouchard, Nuge, you throw Hyman in there too. They they are not how you would build a roster conventionally. You don't want to have all your money tied up in 4 guys and a lot of depth pieces that are all kind of interchangeable in replacement level. You don't want to have the goalie with less than 200 career NHL games going into a Stanley Cup final against the guy who's got 2 Vezinas, got nominated again this year, and if he wins this cup, almost certainly a first ballot Hall of Famer if he's not already in Bob. Edmonton is slight underdogs. Last time I looked, they were like plus 107, plus 108, something like that. So it should be close. I think Edmonton's star power gives them an edge, but Florida's high-end guys are better than Dallas's high-end guys. And as you trickle down, it's close enough where you can see, I see the vision for Dallas, but ultimately, I think Florida's guys are a little bit closer. Barkov's not McDavid. He can give you 85%, 90% of what McDavid can. Hintz couldn't do that. Hintz is good. Barkov is great.
Phil, what do you think? You've
Yeah,
heard the banter. I want to hear you here, Philly. You usually
it's
have
all
more.
good.
You have a really good what do you call that? I like how you poetic almost of you break it down to it's like I sit there and I rack the numbers and I go great, and then you'll just say something so wonderfully simple and I go, oh my gosh, Phil, I think you just solved it. So I want to hear you. I want to hear your sweet voice, Phil.
Well, we had a former NHLer on, Kyle Rossiter, last podcast, and Jimmy and him both picked Oilers in 7. I picked the Panthers in 6, and the outcry from the people that listened to our podcast was heard loud by me. I personally don't know why Panthers in 6 is so out of the question, but my reasoning for it, in case people want to know, and you guys go ahead and correct me if I'm wrong, but I look at the Florida Panthers, and when Jimmy, you asked what's the difference between Dallas and Florida, I think Florida is just gonna hurt the Oilers physically. I think they're gonna hit them every time they get a chance. Like you've got those little rats like Ryan Lomberg, Matthew Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, all former Flames, by the way. You're welcome, Florida. Those guys are they're nasty to play against. And I look at the Oilers when they played against the Canucks. The Canucks kind of played a similar style where they were going after the Oilers, they were hitting them, and I feel like they gave Edmonton a really hard time. And again, I also picked Dallas in 6 against the Oilers, and I was very wrong. And I have to give credit where credit's due. The Oilers turned it up a notch in that series against Dallas, because that was not the same team that we saw against Vancouver. McDavid looked more rested. He looked ready to go. And as Nick said, he was the best player in that series. And he basically willed that team to the conference championship. So those are my reasons for picking Florida. But at the end of the day, I honestly have no clue. And I was talking to someone today. I wouldn't be surprised if either team won in 4, 5, 6, or 7 games. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if the Oilers sweep the Florida Panthers. I wouldn't be surprised if the Panthers, if it's the other way around, the Oilers sweep the Panthers sweep the Oilers, or it goes to 5, 6, 7. I just don't know. I don't know anymore. I don't know what team's gonna show up. And yeah, there's your poem, Jimmy.
Thank you. It was beautiful. Yeah, you know what? I don't think it's unreasonable to pick either team. The reason I'm going 7 for the Oilers is because I just think that something weird is going to happen, and McDavid's the best player in the series, And if you want to split it however way you want, logic is telling me Florida. My assessment is telling me Florida of the situation when I look at the whole big picture. But maybe McDavid goes to another level. Evan Bouchard, I think, is the best defenseman left in the playoffs, and maybe not by much. I think Forsling's pretty close there, and the Panthers D collectively, I think, is probably better. But what if Bob decides he doesn't want to play anymore, or the Oilers decide they're going to cook him upstairs where he lets in all his goals? There's a lot of different things. I just look at the Edmonton's journey here, and I just feel like the stars are aligning, and I'm just going to go against logic and say Oilers in 7, and I could be completely wrong. This is the closest final, I think. I think most finals in the last, and Nick, maybe you'll touch on it, maybe in the last 6-7 years, are pretty easy to predict. This one's probably the most difficult for me in a long time.
Well, I went back and looked at this because I had to do series predictions on like 3 different shows today, and we've only had 2 cup finals go to 7 games in the last 14 years. Boston, St. Louis, and then Boston, Vancouver. I don't think we're going to get 7 games, even though my pick is officially Edmonton in 7. Recent NHL history would tell you that it's going to end in 5 or 6 games. Typically, these cup finals have gone similarly. There have been the outliers, the 2 game 7s I've mentioned, but the better team really starts to pour it on. And as the series goes along, the team that doesn't have it just doesn't have it. You know, Florida last year, as that series went along, Vegas just said, we're not losing. And it was really that straightforward. And Florida wasn't bad last year. Florida, you know, they got a little bit more fortunate, all the overtime wins. Bob definitely did a lot more work. That Florida team was good. Vegas blew their doors off. You go the year before that, Colorado smacked Tampa Bay around. Yes, it got to a 6th game. Series wasn't particularly close. Tampa Bay destroyed Montreal. They handled Dallas very easily. St. Louis and Boston, it took a lot going the Blues way for that to go 7 games. You think about the Achari trip, you think about the 1 overtime win, and then Boston no-shows game 7. But 2018, the Capitals destroyed the Capitals destroyed Vegas. The year before that, the Penguins smoked Nashville, smoked San Jose. Never felt like that series, either of those series was close. And when Pittsburgh was there, never felt like San Jose or Nashville was going to be able to upset them. This one's close. This one can go either way. As Phil said, I wouldn't be surprised whichever team wins. I think both of these teams are really good. I think these are definitely the 2 best teams. I know in recent history, we've had some fluky teams get here. Florida last year, Montreal 3 years ago. It happens, but these teams are both great. I'm very excited to see what McDavid does on this stage. He doesn't know if he's ever getting back here again. Guys like that, when they have these opportunities, they show up. You know, it took Sid 4 years to win his first cup. It took Gretz 5. It took Lemieux 5. He wants to be in that pantheon. I think he understands this moment. I think that alone, him, Draisaitl, Bouchard, I think that's enough to get them over the finish line. I would agree with what you said, Jimmy, the idea that my analysis and logic would tell you Florida. My gut is telling me Edmonton.
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at too. I just when it's this close, I just go with the best player in the universe.
Yeah, and good point too, Nick, by saying both these teams are well deserved to be here for sure. So as hard as that is for me to say as a Flames fan, but they have deserved it. And anyways, yeah, any final thoughts from you guys before we wrap this up?
Who you got winning Conn Smythe, Jimmy?
On either side,
Yeah, sure. You give me one for each team.
like as of right now, or who will end up winning it?
Who will end up winning it if their team wins the series?
Forsling, Florida.
Okay.
Because I think Barkov will be spectacular regardless. I think Forsling's gonna have to go to another level, and it'll be Connor. They don't
Yeah.
win unless Connor's the best player. Yeah.
Agreed on McDavid for Edmonton. And then I think maybe you get a chance, somebody like Kachuk, if they have a really good final. I could see Reinhart if he has a really good final, but probably the safe pick would be Barkov. But these teams are both awesome. There is so
Yeah.
much star power in this final.
I'm looking forward to it. I love being out in the West because the games start a lot earlier.
Yeah.
6
Must
o'clock
be
start
nice.
for us. Oh, it's amazing. 5 o'clock Ranger games. Love it. Love it. So yeah, that's
Nick,
my
thank
final
you.
thoughts.
Nick, thanks so much for joining us and enjoy the finals. And Jimmy, thanks again. And thanks
Yeah.
for coming up to Cheap Seats. You can catch us on Facebook. You can catch us on X, uh, Instagram. We are on all of your podcast, Apple, Spotify, all those places. Check us out.
YouTube.
Give us a like. Yeah, YouTube as well. I don't know if I said that, but anyways,
I gotta
thank you
get.
for listening. What's that?
I said I gotta get Josh getting on that Instagram page he
I
wanted to
know
run. So
Jimmy's son runs our
I'll,
Instagram. We're gonna fire him. He doesn't do his job. So,
I'll
anyways,
get on him.
yeah, enjoy the finals, and we will see you during the finals. And go check out Nick's podcast as well. If you want to plug those really quick, Nick.
Sure. Thank you. Liberty Blue is every Monday. That's Ranger stuff. Locked on Oilers, I got tagged in on an interim basis to do. That's every day. Locked on NHL, I do the National Power Ranking show every Thursday. And then once this playoff run is over, I am assuming I am going back to Locked on Flames, which is every day as well.
That a boy. And I myself am going to go and subscribe to all of those shows myself. So encourage all you guys to go do the same thing. Okay, so catch you guys in the Stanley Cup Finals.